Okay, so what I've done here is before I get started, I decided to go ahead and list all of the functions that are on the face of the DX27, everything that I want to be able to control from the surface. Now, when I designed my first one, I just kind of went in blindly, assuming that I would only need certain parameters and those would be the functions that I would have. But this time I decided to go ahead and see what applies, what's not going to apply to me, and can I get them all to fit on the one page? So what I've done here is I've taken the controls and listed them and kind of assigned what kind of controller I want to make for it. So for instance, if I wanted a fader for all my envelope controls, I've got that. Now then I went ahead and refined it on a second page here, where I assigned, like in this area is a master, and I have the LFO section here, and then I listed the 4 operators on this sheet. But what I ended up doing was only put everything down under operator 1 because they're pretty much going to be the same, with the exception of operator 4, which is going to have a feedback control. So now that I have them all laid out and what controller I'm going to have in there, I can progress to the next step. Okay, so now what I've done here is I've lined up the 9 faders that I needed for the panel for the operator, and each one's going to have a different thing assigned to it when I go to do the labels and when I do the programming, which I will get to shortly here. Now I also want to add 3 buttons to it so that I can do some other changes. So I'm going to go in under the menu here, and I'm going to choose button, and I'm going to say add 4. But what I'll do is I'm only going to put 3 buttons in there. So let's figure that one out. Okay, it's not liking my choice here. So let's do this. The only problem I seem to be having here is these faders are awful skinny for my short, stubby, fat fingers. So we're going to see what we can get away with here. Now we've placed those. I'm just going to double tap and delete that one because I don't need it. It was just easier to program the 1, or bring up the 4 and delete 1 than keep adding 3. All right, so now I've got everything on the panel. I've got all the controls I need. So I've got 9 faders and 3 buttons, and I will go through and program each one of those accordingly. But for right now, that's where I'm at. I'm not entirely certain I'm going to be happy with this layout, only because these faders are awful thin. I may end up having to go with 2 pages here, one for a master section and an LFO section, for each side, and then maybe the 4 operators on here with a master control. But it is important for me. The reason I want the faders is because if you look at an ASDR on a analog synthesizer, a lot of them use faders, some of them use knobs, but it'll give me a graphic representation of what that envelope's going to look like when I play with it. Now I plan for these buttons here, these up and down buttons, those are going to be the rate buttons for the key scaling. And then I've got another one here for the amplitude modulation button. I'm not entirely certain how that works yet, but I read the manual and it's in there and it told me what it did, so I decided it needed to be a button because of the parameters involved. So that's where we're at for this one, and next week we will get into labeling and programming each of the individual controls.